welcome to Miss Julie's Montessori Minutes. I'm Miss Julie, here in my toddler Montessori classroom today to talk to you about how to choose the right Montessori preschool kindergarten or preschool in general or childcare for your child. And the first part of this video, I'm going to discuss some questions I recommend you ask that apply to any school your child might be going to. And then I'm going to talk in the last part of the video how to find genuine or, real, I could say big M for Maria Montessori schools. And if you're looking for any kind of preschool or childcare for your child, you will find this video helpful. In this video particularly, I'm not going to be talking about hygiene or, safety of what their fence looks like, that sort of thing, because I'm here in the United States. Comment below if you're not, and welcome. But I'm here in the United States where there are state licensing, and every state is different. And most states have at least basic safety requirements you have to meet as a licensed child care. And you can probably find multiple lists of, just basic checklists if you are in a place where their unlicensed facilities are allowed to operate. Those kind of lists are easy to find. I'm talking about more of what's going to be a match for your family philosophically and what your values are and what questions to ask to help you make sure that's a good fit. All right, so here we go. The first question is ask the director or the teacher, whoever's giving the tour, why he or she went into early childhood education. And if you're touring a Montessori school, you could just ask why you chose Montessori. And the reason for this is it gives you insight into what their values are, how they view the child, what that relationship with your child is going to look like. And when you ask this question, don't be surprised if they kind of hesitate. Sometimes I almost feel myself gasp when I'm asked this question because it comes so rarely. And I think, how am I going to answer this in, under a minute or two? Because some of us, when we come into this work, it's such a, well, for us anyway, an interesting journey. So don't be surprised if they can go, oh, it's refreshing to have someone ask you that. And as they gather their thoughts, just listen with, your mother or father heart and see if it matches what's important to you. For me would be if they said, oh, I just love kids. I just enjoy being with kids. Now, maybe they can start with that and tell you some more other things, but if that's their entire answer, I would take that as a red flag because we're here to be of service to the child, not to get our kicks because they're so fun. And yes, I do love being children because they are remarkable humans and our entire world depends on them. And they're funny and all that too. But that doesn't a good teacher make, or an attentive teacher make, or a teacher that can plan a curriculum or help your child gain the skills and the knowledge and the enthusiasm for learning, right? So we don't want to hear an answer that's just, I like hanging out with little kids. Want to ask more follow-up questions if that was the only answer. Okay, so first question to ask when you're looking for preschool child care, a Montessori school, is why did you come into education, or why did you decide to work with children? A second question I would ask is, how do you discipline children? And I do hear this more frequently. It's phrased in different ways. You could phrase it as what do you do if two children get into a fight, or what do you do when there's conflict? My hope is that you'll hear an answer that is more geared to preventing conflict than how fairly or how just we punish them. So we're looking for answers that are more about setting up the environment so less conflict occurs, communicating with parents to see if there's something going on with the child, how the curriculum affects behavior, how the language the teachers use affects behavior, that sort of thing. So you want to hear a good dose of how they prevent conflict, and then how they're dealing with conflict in the moment. If you're touring a Montessori school, I hope you'll hear things like, well, we work a lot on grace and courtesy because the children are learning how to be a person of their time and place. Something along those lines that they're still learning, and we just see it as part of the curriculum to help them learn and to prevent the conflict. So I'd want to hear that, hopefully at the start of the answer to the question, and then get around to things like redirection, or maybe I'll invite the child to come with me and make sure I can engage that child. But not just an answer of, oh, we line them up against the wall, you know, when they throw a rock, or we sit them off by themselves, something like that. So when you're looking for a school, you want adults in the environment that are really thinking, how is the environment set up? What kind of lessons am I giving in how to interact with others? How am I modeling that behavior for children to prevent, I guess, what commonly would be called naughty behavior? I mean, it's just like behavior here. We're just learning how to behave. But so number 2, ask how they address unfavorable behavior or how they discipline the students. Number 3 isn't actually a question you need to ask the person giving the tour. It's a question you ask yourself as you're looking at the environment. And the question is this environment set up for the child, or is this environment set up for the adult? Is this area truly set up for the child? Can they reach what they need to be able to clean up for themselves? You know, can they look at everything on the wall and enjoy it? Is it really set up for the child? So that's a question. In my classroom, just looking behind me, you can see we've got hopefully every classroom by now, although Montessori was for proponents of this, but hopefully every classroom by now is having child-size furniture. So if there's a range of classroom, like in the 3 to 6 year old Montessori classroom, they're going to have chairs that would fit the taller children and chairs for the smaller children, so that both sides of child is comfortable in the classroom. Another thing you want to look for is the art that hangs on the wall at the level of the child, so that each child can enjoy the art. Are the plants down low where they can smell and touch the plants, or are they kept up high just for looking at? So Montessori called the 3 to 6 year old environment children's house, but whether you're looking into Montessori schools or not, the room should be designed to serve the needs of the child. So if you go into a classroom, a lot of art, but it's all at the level of the adult, then you have to think, who is this room for? Why is it so high? And that could also tell you, well, maybe they put it there for the child, but they don't really trust children. Like, their view of children is like, I have to put everything up so they can't touch them, or that things we have are precious and I have to keep them away from the children because children can't be trusted. Or it could be it just never occurred to them. So I guess you could ask, if you see a classroom with everything up high the child couldn't possibly really look at or touch, you know, you can say, why is everything so high when you have, you know, 3 and 4 and 5-year-olds here? Because honestly, you know, maybe it never occurred to them. Now, that's not to say there aren't some nice things for the parents to look at in the parent area here. You know, I have, you know, artwork that is there in the sign-in area just to try to make it a little more homey and pleasant for the adults that come in too. So that's a question you ask yourself as you look around the environment. Who is this classroom really for? Okay, 4th is a question. You could phrase this question in a lot of different ways, but what we're wanting to find out with this question is how happy the employees are. Because just like a content, happy parent parents better, a content, happy, appreciated teacher teaches better when they're not stressed out and when they feel like, you know, the director has their back. They're happier, the children. That is what being a leader is all about. So you want to make sure there's good leadership there in the school. So how can you ask this question? Well, a simple way is to ask, you know, what's your turnover rate or your employee retention rate? That answer, I'm not going to say whether there's a right or wrong answer, but listen to how they answer. So if they say, oh, our staff has all been here over 8 or 9 years, well, that's a sign that they're probably being compensated pretty well for the industry, at least, that the leaders there are kind and appreciate them. Maybe they're doing the little things that just make being an employee more fun, and the colleagues' relationships are better, that want to get a feel for how their employees are being treated. You could also just ask, how do you make your employees feel appreciated? And if, they glaze over and like it's never occurred to them to appreciate their employees, that would be a red flag that maybe they're not, or, it would be an unusual question, so, give the person some time to gather their thoughts, as they're not going to have a canned answer for that question, probably. But, they should be able to come up with something like, oh, we always celebrate their birthdays, or, we pay above, I can disclose how much they pay, but we pay, above the typical rate for a preschool teacher, or, we pay for their professional development, things that are showing they're nurturing their staff. So if you're thinking of a way you've kind of tried to figure that out, whether the employees are treated well, comment below. Okay, the fifth question I have, you can ask any sort of preschool, kindergarten, childcare, Montessori school you're touring, is what's the most important part of the curriculum? So what we're looking for in an answer is that there is indeed a curriculum. So if you get a blank stare like, well, what do you mean they're in preschool? We don't have any kind of teaching plan, that would be a red flag. And also, you are, particularly in a Montessori school, but any preschool, hopefully are going to hear an answer that says, well, they're all important because that's why we have them. We have a sensorial curriculum, we have mathematics curriculum, we have a language arts curriculum, we have a practical life curriculum. They wouldn't be here if they weren't important. So some kind of answer that shows that everything that's brought into that classroom is there intentionally with a purpose and to serve the whole child, right? They're a complete person. They have lots of learning needs and learn about who they are, what it means to be a person, how to take care of the environment and themselves, along with what we think of as more academic or more art. So we're looking that everything in that classroom is important and it's all there for a reason, and that all of it is valued by the staff or it wouldn't be in there. So if it's, and that's true if it's not a Montessori school too, just that they're not bringing things in because they got a good deal on it, right? Or because someone dropped off a box of donations and seemed like you might as well put it on the shelf, right? You want to hear that everything has been thought out and chosen carefully, and that just shows intention, that they really are concerned with your child's development and they're really thinking carefully about everything that comes into the classroom. You can just ask what's the most important part. You could even ask what's your favorite part. Let's say that you're not too worried about how soon your child's going to read, you're going to trust in your child's natural timeline, but you are super passionate that your child learn to care for themselves, learn to care for the environment, learn to care for others, then you might want to make sure that's being offered, or that the teacher or the school in general is enthusiastic about what we would call in Montessori practical life. So asking that question when you're looking for a Montessori school or any preschool, kindergarten, daycare program, just, what's the most important part of your curriculum? Okay, the final question to ask can be asked at any school, and it's one that people don't put on checklists so much, or I don't hear a lot about. It is a safety question, and the question is this: What policies and practices do you have in place to protect my child from predators? I have been asked many times during tours how I protect the school, like what I will do in the case of a shooting, which I do have a plan. But statistically speaking, that's not the greatest risk to our children. It's a terrible thing, of course, school shootings, but making sure your child's school, Montessori school or other, or daycare, has put some thought into systems. Leaders should be educating themselves. I encourage you just to ask that question, and you know what, if they don't have a plan, maybe your question will make them get one. Like, I've only had, it's my 12th or 13th year. Well, anyway, 2009, and I was fortunate to get that training in another school I worked at. And so I do have that training, and I wish everyone did, and I think everyone should learn. And, give them grace and space to think, because you may very well be the only person that ever asked it as they answer it. And it's a question that can make people nervous. It's uncomfortable for people for many reasons. So just, give them grace and space to answer, but hopefully you're, looking for a response that shows that they realize it actually happens, and ideally do have a formal plan, or maybe they can come up with the things they do that they're not even really aware that they do. Consciously, it might not be a written plan, but just something that shows that they care. And, you don't want to hear like, oh, well, that would never happen here because everyone's really nice. Like, you don't want to hear that kind of answer. But I really do encourage you to ask that question. So now I'm going to get into a little bit about genuine Montessori. So stick around if you're just curious. What do I think genuine Montessori school looks like? So in some areas of the country, it is common, and of the world, I'm sure. Let me know in the comments below. I have viewers from multiple countries now, so exciting. So it can be common to be like endorsed actually by AMI or AMS, or probably other Montessori organizations that are endorsing schools, that there's a process of applying for and follow up to make sure you're following those practices. So if you live in an area where that happens, be a clear way to see that they're genuinely following Montessori practices. Like, they have trained teachers, they have a full curriculum, all of that. And that is not the only criteria I would use, because in many areas, like here in the Northwest, people just don't spend the money, frankly, to go through that process. Because, well, for me, like if I did that process, I'd probably have to hike tuition for everybody by like $500. I mean, it's expensive. So some part of the country, like, that wouldn't really affect the market of their tuition too much, or it's just really important to the clientele they serve. So that geography plays into that. And another thing to ask is just, do your teachers have Montessori diplomas? And that might be at AMI or at AMS, and there's a lot of other ones. Those are just the two major ones here in the States, and there are other good programs. I couldn't name them all or the ins and outs of all of them, but just ask about their training. And if it's not AMI or AMS, then ask, oh, well, what did that training look like for that teacher? So some do have online components, especially now, that you'll want that teacher to have had hands-on experience with the materials and the 3 to 6 curriculum. It's just a beautiful, rich curriculum, and you want to know that they've actually worked with those materials and had to prove for some kind of test that they are indeed able to present those materials correctly. Because having the things on the shelf does not a Montessori school make. You need the guides that know when to give those materials, in what order to give those materials, and your child is ready for those materials. So you'll want teachers who have a Montessori diploma, so you know they are qualified to teach your child. Another thing I would look for during a tour in a Montessori school is that the leadership really trusts and believes in the Montessori method, and they're not saying things like, oh, and we have, you know, a science lab, or oh, we have this extra thing, like they're packing on all these extra academic enhancements, because the Montessori curriculum is a time-tested, scientifically proven curriculum that serves the whole child. So if you see, and this would be like a larger school, like, oh, we have, you know, the art lab and we're shifting kids around instead of in their little children's house all day, that would be a flag that maybe they don't really completely trust the curriculum that is so complete and beautiful, and that they're maybe doing things to market to parents rather than educating them on Montessori. And so that can kind of just be pervasive, and maybe it means they're not getting the full Montessori, you know, botany lessons in their classroom because they have this little science lab, that sort of thing. So just look for a school that's really supporting the full Montessori curriculum and not just adding things just for the heck of it that aren't necessary and that increase the cost just to cater to the latest fads in education, which there have been a lot of fads in education, but since 1907, woo, Montessori still going strong. Okay. Thanks for watching. Please go ahead and like this video if you liked it. And again, I'd love to hear your viewpoint on this, what's going on in your neck of the woods when it's time to look for a school, and what questions I didn't mention that you asked that gives you kind of a deeper insight into the school's philosophy and the teacher's philosophy. All right, see you next time.